Happy Thursday, NCAA Xavier men's basketball fans, and a little twist today as we'll get to it, but we'll talk about that later. This is your weekly Razor cast talking about Xavier basketball. This is Jeff Zink, the Z in the Razor, along with my good friend Jim Reaker. Jim, how you doing today?
Oh, good afternoon, Jeff. We're doing great here, getting ready for the holidays, although I don't do much to get ready for them.
You don't see much to get ready for, or are you just already ready?
I just don't do much. So I don't do much shopping, don't do much decorating, just kind of along for the ride.
You just you got a good woman there in back of you, so you don't have to worry about that stuff so much. That's okay, though. But that gives you more time to watch the Muskies and talk about the Muskies, and that's what we're here for today. So let's get right to it. A slow week for them. They've got exams down there off Victory Parkway, so no games during the week. And the one we didn't get a chance to talk about was last Saturday, and we talked about on Thursday, but didn't turn out to be much of a game, and that was the turnaround game versus the Colorado Buffaloes. And I'm sure you were down there in all your glory watching what was pretty much a mismatch.
Yeah, the end of the revenge tour, as we call it. Remember, the non-conference losses last year have all been revenged now, the UC Bearcats, the Baylor Bears, and now the Colorado Buffaloes. And, yeah, thinking back again, we talked about that loss last year. It was that was probably one of their worst losses of the season. But it followed up that first loss at Baylor, and it was kind of during this time of the year, and they were traveling for the first time a little bit, and so I think that kind of caught them off guard. Was a good experience, or a valuable experience, probably later in the season as they went on that run in the NCAA. But yeah, we're 3-0 against those teams that we were 0-3 against last year.
Yeah, like I said, 96 points, 69 for it probably wasn't that close. Just an all-around good game. We could sit here and talk about some of the statistics, but the big thing is Xavier just continues to roll as we head into Big East play, and that's a positive thing.
Yeah, they continued their fast starts. That's been kind of a theme this year. They've gotten off to really good starts during a lot of their games. In fact, this one, check back through at 6:42 remaining in the first half, it was 42-16. So, yeah, from that point on, it was pretty much over, and the Muskies just had to maintain their focus. The Colorado Buffaloes did cut the lead down inside 20 in the second half, and actually I think they had it down to maybe about 14 at one point, but you just felt like this was a game that the Musketeers controlled the entire time. One positive, we saw J.P. McCura, although kind of interesting. J.P., of course, has been involved in some news that doesn't have sometimes a whole lot to do with basketball, but, he had not been scoring a lot in the two games prior to that, but he came out and put up 17 in the first half. Of course, then as he did that, he came out the second half and didn't score at all, but kind of an analysis. I think JP just is doing what the other team allows him to do. If he can score, he can score. If he's setting up his teammates, he's doing that, and he's just doing whatever that he needs to do to help the team win. I think he's a totally selfless player. Again, and no other shenanigans during this game, so that was good also.
A guy like that, when you look at the overall stats, there's lots of good things. Over 70% from free throw, which continuing a good run there. Almost 65% from three-point land for the team. So that's a 9 for 14 and 60% from the field. Out-rebounded the Buffs overall, and especially on the defensive rebounds, not giving them their second chances. And once again, Trayvon Blewett getting in there for the rebounds, as well as Tyreek Jones. So lots of good news working from there. And, of course, now they got some time off. We'll talk a little bit about what they're going into, because there's really not much that's going to happen. They'll take it easy here for a week or so before the Big East starts. But just a lot of the same old things we've been talking about. One of the nice things that I see also is Coach Mack was able to go 9 deep. 9 guys getting more than a dozen minutes. They actually had some people in there And last year, you had people out there on the court for 38, 40 minutes at a time. So I think that'll be better for them coming down the road as well.
Yeah, the one player you'd like to maybe see get a little bit more time than he did on Saturday is Elias Harden. He hasn't gotten to play a whole lot. He's a incoming freshman. I think he's going to be very valuable to this team going forward, but I think he's maybe the one freshman who the college game just has a little bit too fast for him right now. But again, getting him out there, getting some minutes right now before the conference season starts, I think is important. And hopefully, don't want to look too far down the line, but hopefully he'll get some playing time in the next two contests. Again, I don't know how much of a factor he's going to be the rest of this season, but I believe he's going to be very, very important as we look to the future. A couple other notes for the fans, if you were there. Tu Holloway was inducted into the Xavier Hall of Fame at halftime, along with Nick Daniels, who that predates my history with the Xavier Musketeers. But we all remember Tu Holloway not too long ago was a fan favorite on this team. And actually another ex-Musketeer was in the house, and that was Kenny Freeze. And, of course, he brought a lot of great memories just recently to the Musketeer program also.
Yeah. I think you'll remember, let's talk about Nick Daniels. When we had our good friend Dale Harmon on last year, he was one of the stars of the team right after Dale had left. I think he spent his freshman year there when Dale was there, and actually went on to pro ball in the NBA for a couple of years as well. So a long overdue honor there, and of course everybody loves Tu when they can see him back. So that's great stuff. Well, what this break kind of gives us a chance to do is, we're always talking about Xavier basketball, and with no games this week other than that Colorado game, we can turn the spotlight a little bit onto the women's program to let people know what's going on. I'll give you a brief rundown for those of you who may not know about Muskies basketball. The program was started in 1971 with head coach Tony Bruneman with just a 7-game schedule, which didn't go so well. They're just 1-6 that year, but by the 74-75 campaign, they were 9-1, and they followed that with a 13-2 record. Bruneman left after that, and Lori Massa, who a lot of people will remember down at Xavier for her not only winning ways, but her winning personality, took over and had some good success until they joined the North Star Conference. And that North Star Conference was a packed conference. They had DePaul and Loyola of Illinois and Marquette in it, and Detroit, Dayton, Butler. So it was a tough conference. So they stumbled a little bit there. They won only 6 of the 38 conference games before they went to the MCC, which Xavier joined, which is the first men's basketball conference. And when they joined that conference, they got a new coach with Mark Elan, who led the women to their first conference championship in 1992 and their first NCAA appearance in 1993. Then Melanie Balcom took over in 1995 and had a 4-year tournament run at the end of her tenure, including 3 NCAAs and A10. By then, the women had moved to the A10 as well as the men. Conference championship, and the team record 31 wins, which still stands, and the first of 2 Elite 8 appearances. Balcom left to take over at Vanderbilt, which she just left a couple years ago. She still works for the SEC, and she took the Vanderbilt woman to 12 consecutive NCAAs. But when she left, the winning ways continued as they were taken over by Xavier's most successful coach, Kevin McGuff. In his 9 years, McGuff took X to a tournament every year, including 6 NCAAs, and finished his career with 3 straight A10 conference championships and the second Elite 8 appearance in 2010. After 2011, McGuff left, and he spent 2 seasons at the University of Washington, but he's currently the head coach at Ohio State, and they're the defending Big Ten champs with consecutive Sweet 16 appearances. Then Amy Watt stepped in for 2 seasons. It didn't go so well, but the university turned to current coach Brian Neal, who's a Northern Kentucky graduate, and transitioned to the Big East. And he sits at a 59-73 record. Had a really tough squad the first year, 8-23, but then followed that with 18-15, 17-13. Stumbled a little last year, 11-19, but they they're facing some tough competition in the Big East, which has been hard for them. They've never finished higher than 7th in the Big East under Coach Neal. He did get invited to the Women's Basketball Invitational once. So the tournament right now they're sitting at 5-3, and they've got some nice wins, but those 3 losses are to Minnesota, Wake Forest, and Bowling Green. And wins include, I'll just wait for the phone to stop there.
Yeah, I'm not in my office today.
Our weekly interruption by the prompter, or the teller salesman, whoever's calling, Jim and his wife. Okay, the wins include just last week they beat Cincinnati by 3 in what they call the Crosstown Classic. And that's the 4th Classic in a row, and Xavier's won 11 of the 14. Another win was over your Fort Wayne Mastodons, which I'm sure doesn't bode well with you. And they have an upcoming game with Missouri, which is currently ranked 16th, as well as Furman in what is called the West Palm Beach Invitational. So there's a quick history of it, and now it'll give us a chance to look at the women down there at Xavier, which I know play a couple of games with the guys back-to-back. I haven't researched that enough to know exactly when those are on the schedule, but that's always a nice night when they do that.
Yeah, and a couple years, I don't pay that close attention to the women's program, but have through the years. I do remember the 2000-2001 team that actually beat Tennessee, which, if you know anything about women's basketball, is always a big power in NCAA. They beat Tennessee that year, made it to the Elite Eight, and I believe they lost to Purdue, who went on to the national championship game. One name you may remember, Nicole Lewandowski from that team. I believe she was all whatever league they were in at that time, I guess A-10, maybe even an All-American. And then, the team in 09-10, that was the team that had Amber Harris and Tashia Phillips. Amber Harris was, I believe, 6'4", Tashia Phillips 6'5". They were both from the Indianapolis area. They were actually a year apart, but one of them, I think Tashia Phillips, was actually older, but she redshirted a year because of an injury. So they were both seniors in that year. And that was a team that came so close to going to the Final Four. I remember watching that game. They were playing Stanford, and late in the game it seemed like a 4 or 5 point lead. Looked like they were going to win it. They missed a shot right underneath the basket in a tie game, and Stanford grabbed the rebound and went the length of the court to lay in a 2-point shot right at the buzzer, and they lost by 2 points. Otherwise, it looked like they had it all but wrapped up a trip to the Final Four. Would have been, of course, in basketball, men's or women's, the first trip for any Musketeer team, but it just didn't happen. And, after those two graduated and Kevin McCuffey, he went to Washington, now he's at Ohio State, left. The program kind of went through downtime there. Amy Waugh was there for a little bit. She actually, I believe, played. I think she was the guard on that team with Harrison Phillips. But, it seems like Brian McNeil now has them back on Brian Neal has them back on the road to being competitive. And, of course, the Big East is a very competitive league.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and some of the folks, Kendall Fincher, who's averaging 7 points this year, has been a 4-year starter. And Kendall comes from that Fort Wayne area, so that was 3-year starter. She's just junior, but they are coming in very young. And some of the people that are contributing, like Aaliyah Dunham, is just a freshman from South Charleston, West Virginia. Other freshmen that are contributing a little bit. Deja Ross, a little bit. The big scorers right now are Imani Partlow, and Imani is a junior who's from here in the Cincinnati area. And second to her in scoring is Jada Bird, and Jada comes from Lithonia, Georgia. And this is a nice thing about international athletics. We've got 2 hometown girls on the squad in Imani and Megan Christopher, who's from my alma mater at Turpin High School. But we also have no, I'll butcher this because I haven't had pronounced it, but Anina Jainen, who's a senior from Finland, which is always a neat thing. But the Muskies are young. The only seniors are Bird and Johnny, and Johnny's not been contributing all that much. So they've got a lot of freshmen on there. Ariana Gray from Maple Heights, Ohio, and Allie Reef from South Whitley, Indiana, Whitco High School. I mean, so the future may be bright here for the Musketeers, but like you just said, Jim, it's very, very tough to get through the Big East no matter where you are. And lately, even though we've kicked DePaul around a little bit, DePaul's been sort of the queen of the Big East. But this year, Villanova's back. They're ranked number 20th right now. And about the same time that our guys go into it, the girls will get into it. Their opener is against Butler on December 29th.
All right, nice tribute for the women, keeping them in mind there.
So I guess you don't have anything else to add to the women. All right, then. We'll move on, and we will we'll wish Coach Brian Neal and the gals a fantastic continuation of their season, and to have a little fun coming up on Sunday and Monday down in West Palm Beach. I'm sure the weather's going to be a lot nicer down there than it is going to be up here, and they can grow in their chances in the Big East and build on that 5-3 record that they have right now. All right, now that brings me to what I'm sure you want to talk about. You threw out there, you've got a couple of items on there, an interesting new transfer and some buzz on the internet.
Well, it's, again, we go a whole week, Saturday to Saturday. The Musketeers don't have anything scheduled because of the exam weeks. In fact, I think we're taping here today, Thursday afternoon, a little bit later than we usually do, but I believe today is the first day that the Musketeers are back on the court practicing. I believe Coach Mack gave them Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday off in order to prepare for and take those exams, and just kind of a good little break there. But, the Internet's been talking about, of course, a lot of people very excited with this fast start for the Musketeers. Again, we haven't mentioned they're ranked 10th in the AP this week and 9th in the coaches poll. So that gets a lot of fans excited. So a lot of the threads have come up on the Internet. Is this the best Xavier team ever? And, of course, so they start comparing it to some of the great teams. Some talk about when David West was there, the 02-03, his senior year, very good team, ended up 26-6, had, I believe at that time, Xavier's highest seed in the NCAA with a number 3 seed. But, of course, the bad thing about that team is they got beat in the second round. If I recall, it was Oklahoma. And then, of course, you have the 03-04 team, the Run, as they refer to. And our Lionel Chalmers was on that team and one of the leaders. Of course, that was a team that had a rough patch. We kind of compared last year's team to that one a little bit. Had a rough patch during the winter. In fact, part of it was Chalmers got hurt and wasn't playing for a little while, but came back, of course, and got on the run. That was a team that had to win the conference, the A-10 tournament that year, because they weren't going to get an invitation to the NCAA, and won 4 games in a row on 4 days in a row. And in fact, if you recall, they beat the St. Joe Hawks, the number 1 team in the country, in the second round that year, and beat them handily by, it seems like they were up by 30 points at one point. So a lot of people think of that team as maybe one of the greatest Xavier teams ever. Of course, that one, again, they were only 26-11. They had quite a few losses, but we remember those great games at the end when they fell just short in making it to the Final Four by getting beat by Duke. I believe the score in that game was like 66-63, and the Musketeers led a lot of that game. And then we talk about the next Elite Eight team, and that was in 07-08. I believe that was a team that got put out by the UCLA Bruins, a team that had Kevin Love and some other NBA stars on it, although they had a great record. I believe that was the first team that ever won 30 games. They were 30-7. Then you have the Jordan Crawford team, who lost to Kansas State in double overtime in the Sweet 16. That was a team, if you remember, had B.J. Raymond. You still see the famous picture when he made the all-important three-point shot that helped beat West Virginia and Bob Huggins to get to the Sweet 16. And so a lot of people look at that team. Some people look at last year's or 2 years ago as maybe one of the greatest teams. They actually had the highest seed. They were the number 2 seed going into the NCAA. Of course, it doesn't take much to remember, again, part of the revenge tour this year with the Wisconsin Badgers on that shot at the buzzer, three-point shot at the buzzer in St. Louis, knocked that team out of the NCAA. And, of course, who can forget last year? You know, that team, again, kind of the same as the 04 team, 03-04 team, had a rough stretch because of injury. Edmund Sumner going down the middle of the season. Sometimes we forget they lost 6 in a row in January, I think early February, before they got the ship righted. Won a couple games in the Big East tournament in order to get a bid, and then making that run and that big win over Arizona and all the way to the Elite Eight, just couldn't make it to the Final Four again. So, you know, again, Musketeer fans are excited. I just say, hey, let's just enjoy it. They're playing well. They're a fun team to watch. So that's been some of the talk online this week, as it's been kind of down. Been down in all NCAA basketball. I try to watch a lot every night, and there's just not been a whole lot on this week. The Seton Hall Pirates did play the other night. They had a game, but you don't see a lot of the teams, you know, they're in finals this week.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. You know, I would say good. If it gives somebody something to talk about, and they're talking about Xavier Basketball, hey, that's great. This is what programs like this and other programs do. We've got to rank things. We've got to do this. To me, this talk is, okay, somebody's off to a hot start in baseball. Can you hit 400? Well, those articles come out in May. We're only 10 games into the season. Could it be one of the best teams ever? Sure. You know, we're going to talk about that more when it gets to NCAA tournament time. They have all the pieces together, but you don't know what's going to happen in terms of stumbles or, you know, don't want to jinx it, but injuries and things that are going on there. And, of course, the other thing that I would say that we have to talk about if we're going to talk about the best team ever is championships. And not necessarily NCAA championships, because they're rare. You only get one a year. But, you know, the Big East championship, you know, a lot of those teams that you talked about did win the A-10 or the NCC. Of course, you didn't mention the one that has won a national championship, McCafferty's 58 team, which won the NIT when the NIT still really meant something. But that's my moniker. You know, you can have great records and you can go to the Elite Eight, and if you get to the Final Four, that's something. But it comes down to me with championships, and I hope that this team is in position to possibly win the Big East. It's a tough one to win, as you've said many, many times. But it's also it's too early. We've still got 3 games left in the pre-conference before we can get to it, and we're barely, you know, not even a third of the way through the season. So enjoy your chatter, Xavier fans. Go and get it. But the comparisons, you've got to do this sort of after the season, not in December.
Yeah, I agree with you totally. In fact, one thing I look forward to this season is the fact that hopefully they might be able to contend for a Big East championship. That would be, you know, again, they haven't done that yet in their, I believe this is the 4th, 5th season that they've been in the Big East. And it's tough to win. Of course, it's when you got teams like Villanova and Seton Hall and some of the great programs of the past like Georgetown and St. John's. So, I look forward to that. I'd like to see them win the Big East. That would be a big challenge. And, let's just wait. We'll wait till the NCAA tournament comes around. And hopefully, again, as we've seen in Xavier seasons before, you never know what's going to happen. And key injuries or things can sometimes turn the tide of what's going on. So, things look great now, but let's just let's hold our breath and move forward through the year.
Yes, it's great. I love that talk like that. Of course, neat thing is last year they had a lot of that talk about could somebody in the NBA average a triple-double, and most people thought no, but Russell Westbrook became the second one to do it, so there is positivity there too. It could be the year that Xavier gets over the top, like Gonzaga got over the top into the Final Four, and we'll just stay behind your Muskies, and as you're drinking your eggnog and sitting around the fire and opening your presents and go from there. But there's also another bit of news that you've tripped up on there that's going to help the Muskies in the future as well in the transfer.
Yeah, and this was kind of unusual, kind of off the radar. A young man by the name of Evan Boudreau, who played his first 2 seasons at Dartmouth. And his stats there are very, very impressive. He averaged over 17 points a game and over 9 rebounds a game. And actually kind of like Karam Cantor, can shoot the three-point a little bit. His last season as a sophomore last year, he shot 35% from three-point range. Actually, as a freshman, he's even better. He shot 40% from three-point range. I don't think he took quite as many his freshman year as he did his sophomore year, and was all Ivy League second team both seasons. And here's the unusual thing about this young man. He decided not to play this season, and he's actually going to graduate from Dartmouth, which, of course, is an Ivy League school, so that can't be too easy. He's going to graduate at the end of his third year. Then he's going to transfer to Xavier, and I'm not sure quite which rule this comes under, whether it's the graduate can move or you sit a year out. I guess he's going to have both covered. But he will have 2 years of eligibility left to play with the Musketeers. And you might ask, why is he coming to Xavier? Why did he want to come to Xavier? His whole thing was he wanted to play in the NCAA tournament. The Dartmouth squad has not been all that great. I think they only won 7 games last year, and they had a losing record his freshman year also. So he wants to play top Division I basketball, so that's his reason for coming. He's actually from Lake Forest, Illinois, and you used to live up in that area. That's in the Metro Chicago area, I believe, isn't it, Jeff?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So he's a 6'8", kind of a strong forward, and you think about it, him and Kaiser Gates, both 6'8", can play under the basket, but both can shoot 3 points. That's going to leave the Musketeer opponents with a tough task. And a little bit of research on him. He comes from a great pedigree. One of the reasons I guess he went to Dartmouth, his brother, older brother, went there also, and his mother graduated from Dartmouth, and her resume is just unbelievable, the pedigree for there. She was Ivy League Basketball Player of the Year 3 straight years, and actually won the Ivy League Shot Put Championship 4 years in a row. And actually his father went to the University of Georgia, was a lacrosse player. So he's kind of like people have kind of compared him to, he's kind of a Matt Stainbrook type looking player. He's 6'8", comes in at about 220 pounds. Yeah.
Well, that'd be a great addition. We're looking for next year. We got already some great recruits coming in there with a 7-footer and Jake Walter, and the guard and Keontae Kennedy, and another forward with Ontarius James. So be a lot of turnover. And of course, we know we are leaving. So we'll be missing Sean O'Mara and Kareem Cantor and Trevon Blewett and J.P. McCura. So it'll be a very different look for the Muskies next year, and to have somebody from the Ivy League come down and join us in the Jesuit University, another fine system of education. Be interesting to see how he fits in. Sounds like a good all-around player and quite an athlete and quite a lineage, as you've put forth there. I mean, how many people's mothers were shot put champions? And you can say that. All right, that's good news coming off there. Let's look a little bit at the week that's coming up. There's really not much to talk about. I don't want to jinx anything, but upcoming is East Tennessee, but they lost to NKU North by 18 to open the season. Of course, they came back and beat them by 13. They also beat Indiana Fort Worth by 10 and lost to UK by 17. But we're not expecting much for there. And then after that, next week also we have Marshall coming up from just across the river there in West Virginia. They lost to Illinois by 17, and they lost to a Moorhead team that we beat by 52 by 3. So can we really expect a challenge from either of these teams before we meet again?
Well, if there's a definition of trap game or trap games, this would definitely be it. A couple of games kind of shoehorned in there right after those 3 big revenge games that the Musketeers won. And then they obviously will be looking ahead to the Big East season, which starts December 27th at Marquette. And so I'm a little concerned looking at that East Tennessee State Buccaneer team from the Southern Conference. Just a couple things you got to worry about. Again, yeah, they got shellacked by NKU, but then came back and defeated them by 13 points after taking an 18-point loss, which was the first game of the season, so that may have something to do with it. But they were the Southern Conference champions, regular season champions and tournament champions last year, finishing last season with a 27-8 record, lost in the first round of the NCAA to the Florida Gators. So, but they've played some big-time basketball. And here's the thing that both of these teams concern me a little bit about. What we've seen, we go back to that Arizona State game, a weakness is maybe a team that has some quick guards. And both these teams' top scorers are their guards. For the East Tennessee State Buccaneers, it's 6'4", DeSante Bradfield, who is averaging 12 points and 6 rebounds. And the other guard, Jalen McLeod, is averaging 11 points. So that tells me they're probably athletic guards, and that concerns us a little bit, but it is probably a good challenge for the Musketeers. And then for the Marshall Herd, they were 20-15 last year. They're actually sitting at 7-3 right now. And of course, yeah, if you compare, do the what do they call that math program? You compare one to the other. They don't seem that there'll be a challenge for the Musketeers. But again, they got a couple guards, both juniors. 6'5", John Elmore is averaging 24 points a game. And 6'3", C.J. Burks is averaging 18 points a game. They're 2 guards. So that concerns me a little bit. And the other thing about the Marshall Herd is they put up a lot of points. They're averaging 89 points a game. So it kind of tells me they probably want to play fast. And again, if you go back to that Arizona State, we have, if you remember that game, that was kind of the thing that hurt them there, a team with some fast guards that scored a lot of points, ended up scoring 102 points on the Musketeers. That again, that's fading as a memory, but that hurt that day, and so we gotta come ready to play. And again, it's a long season. It's hard to come ready to play every day.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. I think one of the things to look at is that East Tennessee State game is a 2:00 start time, which is a little different from most of them. And, first game back in over a week may not affect the Muskies all that much, but when you're used to playing at night. And that Marshall team did come to Cincinnati last year and took the Bearcats into overtime before they finally fell. And they hit lights out from 3 when they did that. So it's going to be interesting to see both those games. Of course, we've got one other we'll talk about next week. University of Northern Iowa will host the Bearcats before we get into Big East play, and we'll spend what time we have next week talking about the Big East and see where we go and see if we might take a week off over the holidays or we might continue on. We'll decide that later. But as always, it's fun to go down there. Both games at the Cintas Center. Tickets available. In fact, that Marshall game's a little earlier at 6:30 rather than the later times that they'll have. But always entertaining in a great way to do it, and probably lots of tickets available because they're not as well known and give you a chance to see the Muskies, and probably not as many students around with their winter break. So we'll wish them well there. Good.
That's another big factor in that game is the students will be gone. I believe tomorrow's the last exam day at Xavier, so a lot of the students, Xavier drawing students from all around the country. A lot of them leave and go home, so it'll create. It always does creates a little bit different atmosphere in the Cintas Center because you don't have the student section. Usually not full at that time. In fact, sometimes they even sell those tickets to the general public down in that end where the students usually sit. So just another factor to kind of if it's the perfect storm for the Musketeers to get upset. Looking at all those factors going into those games leaves me to be a little bit concerned.
Yeah, but not too much concerned. Nice little thing. We'll get up there. I don't know if you saw it there. Coach Mack is proud of himself for the second time in his marriage. He actually was able to put up Christmas lights. So the break was used for a couple of other things, 2007 and this year. So he got to spend a little time at home, as he said on his Twitter feed. Well, that's good. We'll be back on Tuesday with our weekly Trogcast, two really old guys talking NCAA basketball. We'll do a few things there. It's been a bit of a quiet week so far. A lot of things calmed down, but there's always something to talk about here and there. And we'll be back again next Thursday with our weekly Razorcast. And that leads us to the last segment, as we always say, for our trivia and tidbits. So I'm sure Jim has something that he wants to run by me today.
Well, we talked about Evan Boudreau, the transfer coming to Xavier next season as a graduate student from Dartmouth. I knew it was an Ivy League school, but I didn't even know where it is. Do you know where Dartmouth is?
It is in New Hampshire.
You are correct.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the question of the day. Question of the day is, I always like mascots. Do you know what the Dartmouth mascot is? What they're called, the Dartmouth?
Well, this carries on to a conversation we had on one of our programs a couple weeks ago about programs that the mascot doesn't end in S, and Dartmouth is one of those. I think they're called the Big Green or something like that, but it's not it's not a strict mascot. But I think that's it. The Big Green or the Green or something like that.
Very good, Jeff. The Big Green. In fact, the Ivy League has 3 teams that have just colors as their mascot. You have the Harvard Crimson and the Cornell Big Red. So, Dartmouth, they are the Big Green. Actually, kind of an interesting history of the school. I didn't know that much about it. I was reading a little bit. Actually, the university was started, I believe, in the late 1700s, and it was started as a school to teach Native Americans about English heritage and culture, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And in fact, at times, I was reading through, they have been dubbed the Indians, but that has never been taken officially by the school. Again, they go by the name the Big Green. So you are correct on that. Very, very good, Jeff. Yeah, we'll give you an A today.
I looked at a few of them and noticed that there were, I think, 3 of the 8 in the Ivy League that fits your moniker of not having mascots that fit with S. So, no, in Dartmouth, I have actually the son of one of my best friends from Venezuela is up there finishing his doctorate in some sort of biochemistry or something like that. So we'll give a shout out to Alejandro Damasio as we're talking about Dartmouth and Evan Boudreau.
All right, I'm sure you got some fun facts for December 14th. Actually, I will point out December 14th is my son's birthday, the one that actually got us kind of started in this whole venture of podcasts on the Xavier Musketeers.
So happy birthday, Tyler. Hope you're not too cold up there. It's a bad storm.
No, Austin.
Excuse me. Austin, that's right. Austin. Tyler's in the spring sometime. That's good. Well, not much about December 14th, but I thought with us focusing a little on the women, we did go back and visit that aspect of Xavier University. Xavier's been around as a university for 175 years, as they just celebrated. Goes back to 1831. But they didn't fully admit women until 1969. But women could attend the college since 1914 on evening, weekend, and summer school classes. But it was basically an all-guys school until 1869. Edgecliff College, which is another Catholic college in Cincinnati, merged with Xavier in 1980, and Edgecliff had been an all-women's school originally called Our Lady of Cincinnati College, and that had been founded in 1935, and the Edgecliff area of Cincinnati and the Edgecliff Towers is where that used to be, and Xavier sort of ran a Edgecliff campus there for many, many years until they sold that land. In fact, the University of Cincinnati bought it, and they used part of that campus for their College of Applied Sciences. And when you get on the sports, of course, with Title IX, you have to have an equal number of sports in both ways. The women, like the men, participate in 8 sports, and 7 of them, of course, are the same, and that's basketball, cross-country, golf, soccer, swimming and diving, track and field, and tennis. I'll throw a trivia question back. Do you know that the only male sport and the only sole female sports are at Xavier?
Well, I know the only male sport is baseball, and they don't even have a softball team, which would, of course, be the female equivalent. They only have a club team for softball. The only male sport, would that be, no.
Well, the only male sport you mentioned, which is baseball.
I just said that. Female sport would be, I don't know.
The sport of I don't know, which is an answer to many, many of Jim's trivia questions when he throws them at me, but it's volleyball. Volleyball,
yeah.
It's been a very powerful program for many years. And did you know that Xavier's only individual champion in the NCAA was a woman? Karen Juzik, I know I'd pronounce it Juziuk, Juzik, won the NCAA small bore rifle event in 1998. So that's Xavier's only individual NCAA championship. So a shout out to the women, and again to Coach Brian Neal as they go through their season. And, of course, we'll be back talking a lot more about Coach Chris Mack and the men's Muskies next week, as we'll have those results from East Tennessee State and Marshall. We'll be able to talk about Northern Iowa and the upcoming Big East schedule. But until then, just keep watching basketball wherever it is, having fun, and we'll see you next week on our Trogcast on Tuesday and here on the Razorcast next Thursday. And until then,
go Muskies!